I had previously sown salad greens in recycled clear plastic salad boxes, using store-bought potting mix in one and my own homemade compost in the other. I was excited to see how things were coming along. Both of these plant starts have done well. They've grown compact and they have a nice root system, so I think it's time to transplant them. However, I think there's a slight advantage to the home compost. It just seems that the plants are a little bit bigger and more and healthier. So even though the store-bought compost was, or the store-bought potting soil was organic, it still seems that the homemade compost, which I made without even doing much maintenance, is better. I had selected a spot to plant these lettuce seedlings. It was next to my fence line, and although it receives full afternoon sunlight, morning sun is blocked by the shade of my neighbor's home. As you may have noticed already, in general, my garden has a bit of an exposure issue. Only a few spots get the ideal 6 to 8 hours of direct sun because of the shade cast by the houses and trees. The fact that my land slopes facing north only aggravates the problem. I can only wish for the direct sunlight I see in many homes around the area, with 8 to 12 hours of direct southern sun exposure, growing nothing but lawn. If only they knew the hidden treasure they have in their hands. I make do with what I have, and even manage to get lots of tomatoes and cucumbers, especially when the weather cooperates. However, at times, having a partially shady garden can be beneficial when growing salad greens, especially lettuce, that responds well to a bit of shade. It can manage with as little as 3 to 4 hours of direct sun. This spot here grows lettuce well. I also cannot complain about my soil. It is picture perfect and fertile, the stuff lettuce plants crave. I went about plopping my smaller lettuce starts, spacing them about 6 inches or so from each other. That is if you want your lettuce to grow as a head. You can space them much closer if you intend to use them as leaf lettuce grown in the cut and come again style. I decided to plant the remaining chicory seeds in the backyard, where it is a bit shadier, but since summer was close in hand, I wanted to use that shade to my advantage. This area here served as the early spring cutting garden for the tulips and the daffodils. However, I want to plant some lettuces and chicories during summer because it's the best place to do that. It has partial shade, and that way the lettuces will be able to sustain the summer heat, and they won't bolt as fast as if they were in a full sun position. Now I need to clean it up a little bit, and the odd thing is that I already see there are some lettuces growing from last year where they self-seeded, where I let the seed heads develop. So I just have to be careful not to take out what I already want to plant. And if it's growing by itself, it's best. Now I think it's a great use of space to reuse the same space that the tulips have used in the early spring to grow lettuce, because in just a few weeks these bulbs will be withering away and they're going to leave the space open. That way, if I grow a quick growing plant like lettuces or chicories, they'll use up the space efficiently and they won't be really competing. And while the plants are small, the slight shade that these produce, since it's already getting into late spring and early summer, they're gonna actually shade the early transplants, making them acclimatize better. So I think it's a good system. And also, once it comes time for me to pull up the bulbs of the tulips, because they need to be refreshed, you need to pull them up to save them during summer so they don't rot. It will be the right time to harvest the lettuces, so that's not going to be a problem. It is always good to have something growing. If you don't do it, nature certainly will. That is why weeds are around. They scab over exposed land, locking in fertility in a useful cycle. If there is one thing we should learn by watching nature, is that the wealth of fertility cannot be stored away and hoarded for long. For it to yield and prosper and grow in syntropy, it must be used and shared. It is precisely by the turning of this great cycle that nature's wealth, soil, is formed. Soil is nothing but the accumulation of thousands of cycles of growth, breaking down mineral rock, mixing in organic matter and life to create a platform for the next generations of life to have an easier time growing. To overlook that is not only insensitive, but outright foolish. Soil that is left bare repeatedly will become compacted as organic matter is lost. And just as I expected, about 6 weeks later, I had beautiful heads of chicory growing. I made sure to keep the soil around them always mulched with grass clippings to fertilize them and keep the weed pressure down. Some of them were much bigger than the others. That was due to how the tulips had shaded some more. That meant I was going to have a staggered harvest. Coming up in the next block, I will share with you what became of the lettuce in the front yard, right after this commercial. If you enjoy the videos and would like to support the channel, you can purchase an original painting or drawing in my Etsy shop, or become a patron in my Patreon. A few weeks of very wet weather prevented me from adding new layers of grass clippings as mulch. That meant that weed seeds got the bright idea to colonize the space between my nascent seedlings. When the weather cleared a bit, I went out to give a helping hand to the recently outnumbered lettuce. But not all weeds were true weeds. Some were very useful. One of the most important skills you acquire as a gardener is to be able to distinguish what are weeds and what are actually plants you want. Because since I usually let things go to flower to save seed, I end up with lots of volunteers, and that's always a good thing in my book because I don't have to plant them and they'll grow exactly where they want to grow in the right conditions and at the right time. For instance, I have several sunflowers here, and I'm trying to weed this bed of lettuces that I've grown. The lettuces are doing well, but I know that if I don't do this now, the weeds are gonna take over. So to know that this is actually a weed, when it's morning glory, it's a beautiful flower. This one not so much because it's the more generic one that's smaller, bloomed, and just blue. But it's something nice to have, but you can't let it take over. Even if you try to take everything, one or two will still grow and they'll still set seed, and that's its normal path, and maybe we should let it do that. Other things are dandelions. I've actually stopped necessarily taking them out. I let them be, and I can either eat the leaves, as these are beautifully grown, and they're amazing quality. That's the type of leaf that you buy in a health food market, or I can just chop and drop and it will actually feed the soil. So knowing which seeds to take out and which ones to leave is very important. I also have here marigold that I actually just sprinkled the seeds all over, and I'm glad to see that it's growing because I don't have to plant it. Many times in the past I was planting that in cups, and the more I can save my labor, the better it is. And I know they'll grow well. And I know that I'll also get the right timing for the lettuce to grow and be ready to harvest in the sunny spot. And later on, then a second succession of flowers with the sunflowers and with the marigolds, will take over, and that's going to be perfect with very little effort. The only thing I'm having to do now is actually weed a bit, and the only reason why I'm weeding it is because I did disturb the soil when I planted the lettuce. If I had kept it covered with more and more layers of mulch, there wouldn't be any weeds here. My methods are a bit unorthodox. Some may even say unhinged. Using grass clippings, while it has several advantages, does have a drawback. They usually have plenty of grass and weed seeds. By throwing them over your garden, you are effectively sowing weeds in your garden. But my crazy secret is to keep adding more and more layers of mulch, always smothering the previous plants and suppressing the sprouting of new weed seeds. If you want a more rational approach that will lead to less and less weeding over time, tree clippings and wood chips are great resources for that. As summer temperatures soared, reaching the high 90s, I went out to harvest the remaining lettuce. I had harvested some a few weeks prior. Some of the remaining lettuce were bolting, but not all. Since I planted these around late, mid-spring, it's already early summer, and they're starting to bolt, a lot of them. Some of them are spindly, but this oak leaf lettuce variety here, which was part of the mesclun, is actually surprisingly resisting bolting. It's creating a nice head even in summer, hot, muggy weather here in Maryland. So this is definitely a variety to keep in mind and save for growing during summer, because it's very useful for that. That is why I like to experiment growing several different varieties, and as time has passed, I have noted clear winners for my climate, like this oak leaf lettuce and the green salad bowl lettuce. They produce really well in spring and summer, resisting bolting. The towering volunteer sunflowers were starting to establish their dominance in the summer garden landscape. They do impact the growth of others around them, not only by blocking light and sucking water, but with allelopathic chemicals that retard the growth of neighboring plants. Beans and potatoes are said to be particularly hindered by this. But I can't resist letting a few sunflowers grow here and there. What they may rob in production, they repay in beauty.